This is Jumanji. It's a very real board game based on a very fictitious board game, originally depicted in a 1981 children's book by Chris Van Allsburg. In 1995, a movie was produced starring Robin Williams, and the first playable version of Jumanji was produced by Milton Bradley to go along with the movie. In 2017, a sequel to the movie was released called Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, and Cardinal Games reissued the original games such as Milton Bradley had produced in 1995. In 2021, Spin Master Games produced this deluxe wood box edition of Jumanji, and this game for me kind of lives in infamy, as this was the first edition that I had played and reviewed on my show, and it's probably one of the worst board games that I've ever played. Now that got me really curious about the other editions of Jumanji, and I recently ran across this one here called Jumanji the 30th Anniversary Edition, released by Spin Master. Now it's copyright 2024, but I believe it hit the market early 2025 to coincide with the 30th anniversary of the 1995 release of the Milton Bradley game. Yeah, it caught me off guard because the book's from 81, so when it said 30 years of Jumanji, I had to think about it to realize, oh, they're celebrating the Milton Bradley there. But that being said, I decided to sample this one and see what the evolution of Jumanji was all about. Were they all bad games, or did we just have one stinker that didn't quite make it? Let's take a look and find out, starting with this 2017 edition from Cardinal Games. When we look at the box here, it's very visually striking and very much reminiscent of the classic Jumanji art that we all know and love from the children's book. When we flip it over, we see a close-up of the game board and a description of what the gameplay is like. It's a lift-off top box, and it features a nice cardboard organizer inside that keeps all of the game's accoutrements well in place. When we look at the game board itself, we see that it takes quite a bit of table real estate here. So you get this game board that folds up kind of like a brochure, with a little cutout in the center for this vacuum-formed decoder to sit in the center of the game board. Each player will get one of 4 wooden painted pawns. I felt these were really nice. They had a nice chunky feel to them, and I love wood game components. There's also a plastic rhinoceros that is used to block other players on their path throughout the game. A little hourglass that players will race against to roll their rescue dice in order to get out of dangerous situations depicted on the 30 danger cards that they will be drawing throughout the game. Players will also navigate their path using an 8-sided die. To play the game, players will roll and move their character along their path. If they land on a blank space, they will draw a danger card and place it into the decoder. They'll then read the riddle, which is basically a description of what type of danger they're trying to overcome. In the upper corners of the card, it will have a number for how many spaces players can earn from successfully defeating the danger, and a symbol that they will need to roll on their rescue die. Each player will have 1 rescue die. Now, the player who moved does not roll. The other players are rolling to rescue that player from the peril. So the player whose turn it is will flip the hourglass, and all other players will roll their rescue die as fast as they can to get the intended outcome. Now, if the other 3 players at the table manage to roll the correct outcome, in this instance, I'll use the leech card that I have, they need to roll a raft. If they roll correctly, they get to move the 1 or however many spaces that are indicated on the corner of the card. If they don't roll successfully, they will need to place the card on what's called the Doomsday Grid. This grid of 10 card spaces tracks how much collective damage the entire team playing has taken. And if the Doomsday Grid fills up with 10 cards, all 4 players have lost the game. Of course, to win the game, you have to be the first player to reach the center of the board and shout Jumanji. Along the way, you'll face other setbacks, like the rhinoceros. If you land on a rhinoceros space, you can choose to place the rhinoceros in the space in front of another player, blocking them and denying them a turn. If you happen to land on a wait for a 5 or 8 space, I know this isn't my path, I was using it as an example. There's one. If I land on a wait for 5 or 8, I have to give other players the opportunity to roll a 5 or an 8 to release me, and I have to wait until they successfully do. There are also these little danger zones here where if I land in one of these spaces in these little circles, and that's where the trails intersect with other players, all players have to roll their rescue die to overcome the danger. And if they fail, they have to continue to draw danger cards until we all succeed, which means we can rack up cards on the Doomsday grid really, really quickly. It's very interesting how the game is mostly cooperative with just a touch of player versus player action. And the funny thing is you can all lose as a team, but it only takes one player to reach the center. And I guess it depends on how much of a team player you are as to whether you determine that as winning as a team or winning as an individual. Now, this wood box edition that I have in my hand, I have an entire review of on its own, so I'll add a link in the description. Suffice to say, this makes a better collectible piece of memorabilia about Jumanji than an actual game of Jumanji. And I do want to point out one thing. The decoder that came with this edition did not functionally work. So the decoder that comes with the 2017 and the original Milton Bradley and the later editions uses a red film and a red-blue decoder pattern on the cards. This edition used green. I don't know why, but the green simply did not work, amongst other quality issues. So fundamentally, on many levels, this game failed to even function. So we're going to set that aside for this review. Don't want to knock over my bottle of water. And we are going to get to the 2024 30 Years of Jumanji edition. Now, when I first looked at this, I thought Jumanji is more than 30 years old, but then I remembered the first playable game wasn't produced until 1995, so this does fit that timeline. Now, interestingly enough, at first glance, it looks the same as the 2017 edition, which is a reissue of the 1995, so you'd figure not many changes have happened. However, when you really dig into it, you start seeing the differences. Things like replacing the 8-sided die with traditional 6-sided die. The rescue die are also traditional 6-sided die. We still get 30 danger cards here. We still have 4 player pieces. However, now they're much more ornately molded as well. When we look at the game box, it's very, very similar, but we notice that Van Pelt, the hunter, is missing from his corner and has now been replaced with the little alligator here, which I thought was kind of nice because the characters depicted in the pictures on the front are actually the same characters that are used as the player movers. When you flip this one over, you see a close-up of the game board, but again, no depiction of people actually playing the game. They want you to know how much of a risk it is to start. It's a lift-off top box, and the cardboard organizer in the center is one of the best space savers I've ever seen. Not only is it printed to be thematically fitting, but it even has a special cutout to help keep the new all-solid plastic decoder. This is not film. This is a red plastic lens fastened very securely to a brown plastic base that can freely rotate in the center portion of the game. This is probably the biggest quality of life improvement across all of the Jumanji games that I've played so far, is the fact that we actually have a decoder that not only works but is made of solid materials. You're also going to notice 2 new player pieces, a hippopotamus and a lion. They add a little extra spice to the game as well. So the rules are mostly the same. Players will be rolling, instead of a D8, a D6 to move along the path. If they land on a blank space, they will again draw a danger card, read the riddle, and players will race to roll their rescue die for a favorable outcome. However, some of the things that have changed in this game are things like the lion, the hippopotamus, and instead of having a roll 5 or 8 space, we now have a rock slide. So first, starting with the lion. At the end of my turn, I can choose to move the lion starting at the center space along any trail outward the amount of spaces that I rolled when I rolled my initial move. And if the lion happens to land on a player piece, it sends that player piece back 5 spaces and the lion is reset to his home place for another player to initiate moving on the end of their turn. So the lion gives you the opportunity to directly go after other players. The hippopotamus taking place of the rhino also functions different. If I land on a hippopotamus space, the hippo now lands directly in front of me blocking me instead of being something that I can use to block other players, which I thought was pretty neat. There are also some clarifications to the rules, whereas these little spots here in the circles, the original rules of the game do not tell you how many spaces are in these circles. They treat them like a single space. When you visually look at them, they clearly have 5 spaces, and the rules in the new version actually explain that these are 5 spaces, and that does affect gameplay because it gives you more opportunity to land in that area and cause an incident where everybody has to roll for a save. The 5 and 8 being replaced with a rock slide, it's functionally very similar. Instead of rolling for a 5 or an 8, players have to roll a 3 or a 6 for the save. However, I did think that there was kind of a little bit of humor in that I didn't see right off. Mrs. Old Crappy Couch, the bigger fan of the movies, pointed this out. The 5 or 8 space is very much tied to the Robin Williams movie and has a huge effect on the plot, whereas the later movies starred Dwayne Johnson, also known as The Rock. And I thought it was really funny that they replaced the 5 or 8 dynamic from the Robin Williams movie with a little nod to The Rock. I don't think that was intentional, though, because the part that made it really funny is The Rock's slide sets you back. And let's face it, once The Rock got introduced to the Jumanji series, we got a surprising bump with the pleasant 2017 movie. And then the follow-up movie was definitely a slide in quality. So I thought it was sort of a funny, unintentional commentary on the modern movies. But that being said, it made me giggle. That was a fun little adult piece of humor in here. I shouldn't say adult humor. That's not really lewd, but it was funny, and most kids wouldn't have caught that reference. I was really proud of my wife for seeing that and having a giggle. Now, when we talk about the overall quality of the game, I don't want to overlook the rules. The rule book that we get with the 2017 Jumanji is a pretty basic fold-out printed on black and white paper. The rule book we get with the 2024 edition actually thematically looks like the game board and folds out just like the classic game board. It's full color, full bleed, very, very nice rule book. So altogether with the trappings and trimmings, I would say that the 2024 edition, though it does have a smaller footprint on the table, gameplay-wise, much more pleasant. Gives players way more agency over the characters. The stakes are way higher. There's a much greater challenge to the game. There's a much greater chance of you not making it to the center. It's still about one player making it to the center and all players losing if the doomsday grid fills up. But that being said, the alterations to the amount of time you get, as well as the alterations of the dice going from D8s to D6s, the fact that you don't have to put stickers on your rescue dice, I mean, just the dice themselves feel good. Everything feels really premium. One of my only complaints about this would be that we have these little cardboard standees for the hippopotamus and the lion, because I would have expected these to be molded plastic too, to be completely honest. It's the only thing that just doesn't seem to fit. But that being said, the actual mechanics of using them does enhance the gameplay. So I do actually really like the 2024 edition, 2025 edition. Look, the 30th anniversary, I gotta say this right. The 30th anniversary edition of Jumanji by Spin Master Games pleases the couch. This is an excellent return to form. When I'm looking at this, okay, so we've got the 2017, which is a reissue of the 1995 with almost no changes. I actually had to go onto a fan wiki to see what the changes are, and almost all of them are minor artistic changes and the riddles themselves. So this is a really good example of what the original game is like. When we compare it to the 30th anniversary and they actually boldly went out and made some changes to the game and optimizations of the gameplay, and every single one of the optimizations helped. My only major gripe really, as far as the changes to the art, which are a bit more simplistic on this, but look more vibrant. The cards here drive me nuts. The challenge cards in the new one have much more plain art on the front, but more ornate on the back, whereas the original have plain art on the back and really ornate art on the front. So I do really, really dislike that change, but it's so minor that if you didn't have them sitting next to each other, you're not going to notice. So I got to give it Spin Master Games, excellent return to form. Excellent return to form. I'm impressed. I'm very pleased with this purchase. None of this stuff was sent to me. These were all ones that I hunted down for this episode, you know, especially after doing as negative of a review as I did on the 2021. I highly doubt Spin Master wanted to throw me a Jumanji to see if they could win me back. But I gotta say, they definitely did. If I was choosing between getting a vintage edition of Jumanji and a modern edition of Jumanji, I would 100% advise you to get the modern edition of Jumanji. And that's two now from Spin Master. That's two iterations of Jumanji that I've really liked. I like this 30th Anniversary Edition. There's also a game called Jumanji Stampede that I will always talk the praises of. It is I should sing, but I can't stay on key. Jumanji Stampede is great if you are a fan of classic games like Fireball Island and you want something that has a little bit more table presence and is 100% co-op. It's very much more of a tie-in to the modern movies. However, it was before The Rock started causing a slide in quality. So make sure you check out Jumanji Stampede as well. I'll have a link in the description to that review. Just great. So far, realistically speaking, of the 4 Jumanji games I've played, Jumanji Stampede, Jumanji the 2017 reissue, Jumanji the 2021 Collector's Edition Woodbox, and Jumanji the 2024/2025 Anniversary Edition, I've only had the one stinker, and that was the Woodbox. And the gameplay was awful, but the actual game board was a beautiful keepsake. I thought it was a really, really nice piece of memorabilia. It's just unplayable as a game. It has a lot of features where there's activities suggested in it that I would not want my kids doing. Yeah, I mean, check it out. It's things like wet a paper towel and try to dry it off as fast as you can while you're playing a board game. Kids, I don't want you playing with water next to the board game in the living room. Sorry. There are things like that where it transcends being a board game and starts becoming a prop to help you play Jumanji instead of a game that you play Jumanji. So if that makes sense, watch the review. It'll make more sense when you see the context. But I love this new version of Jumanji. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Is there a different version of Jumanji you think I should try out? I know there's some other deluxe ones. There's a fancy talking one I've seen. Comment below and let me know. Thanks a lot to my couch potatoes, the channel members who make awesome videos like this possible. You guys rock. And thank you for joining me today. I love doing these awesome reviews with you, and I can't wait to do it again next time.